Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we'll be previewing Game Week 33. There are only 6 game weeks left now, which means every decision needs to be absolutely spot on, and I'm going to do my best to help you make those decisions. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, before we jump into today's video, I just want to give a massive shout out to Ultimate Champions who continue to sponsor the videos here on this channel. As you can see on your screen, I'm actually doing a pack opening at the moment. So this is on the alpha. If you actually join the alpha now, which is the first link in the description, they'll give you some free tokens which allow you to open some packs, which is super cool. Eventually, these will obviously cost tokens and money in the real game, but they're free for now. So if you join the game, get some free packs. It's a win-win situation. Start to get to grips with the game. As you can see on your screen, I actually managed to pack 5 epic players, which are going straight into my team for the next game week. I absolutely love this. It's basically a combination of fantasy football, FIFA, trading cards as well. So if you've enjoyed any of those things in the past and you want to give some different platforms a go, do join Ultimate Champions. Like I said, link to in the description will be to the alpha game so that you can join and play, and also to their Discord community so you can join that, get some potential further free packs and some different roles as well. So massive shout out to Ultimate Champions. Please support the channel. Go join Ultimate Champions and tell me what you think of it if you do. So we are going to cover a whole host of questions relating both to Game Week 33 in particular and also beyond for the remainder of the season as well. Only 6 game weeks left now. But I think probably the biggest piece of news ahead of Game Week 33 is that Matt Doherty is out for the remainder of the season. It looks like it could be up to 12 weeks. Wishing him a speedy recovery because he's been absolutely fantastic in recent weeks for Tottenham and for FPL as well. He's actually sitting at a non-penalty expected goal involvement of about 0.45 per 90, which is better than most midfielders and attackers in the game and better than pretty much every defender in the game, equal to the likes of Trent and James. So Doherty was a fantastic option, but we need to move on now. But it does offer us some opportunities if we want to move in some different directions. Maybe we want to downgrade, potentially we want to upgrade as well as an option. So what I've got on your screen is I've not actually included the likes of Rudiger, James, Cancelo, Trent, Robertson, because yes, they're fantastic options, but they are also quite a bit more expensive than Doherty, and they're very obvious options. Now, if you haven't considered them, that isn't an insult. I do think that they're fairly obvious options, but I don't necessarily think that with all of the premiums that are doing quite well, with a lot of the midfielders you might want, like a Havertz, like a Foden, potentially if you're bench boosting, it might not be worth going for 5 premium defenders. It might be worth going for either 3 or 4, and as a result, you might actually be looking to downgrade Doherty. So if you can get up to James and Cancelo, Trent, Robertson, and you don't own a couple of those already, I would probably do it. But outside of that, here are the options up to 5.4 million that I would potentially be looking at for your teams. The first thing to note before we even jump into looking at the underlying statistics is that for me, potentially even more so than team defensive data and attacking data for these players, is when they're doubling and when you plan on playing your chips. And I know I've been saying this for a while now and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you're planning on free hitting 33, Share might be fantastic for 33, but you wouldn't want to transfer him in. If you plan on free hitting in 36, you probably don't need to focus on players that double in 36, and maybe you should focus on players that double in 37. Equally, if you're planning on free hitting in 37, a Crystal Palace defender probably isn't your priority right now. So you really do need to think about when you're playing your chips. If you need to bench boost, you need to also think about that as well. So think about your chip strategy and make transfers based on that. And that's why that final column you can see there, just to the side of me, is when the teams are currently doubling. So starting with the 2 £4.4 million defenders, this does largely depend on your chip strategy. I do think whether you're on your free hit or not, I do think Fabian Schär is a fantastic option for this week. I think Newcastle players in general are fantastic options. Yes, their defensive data hasn't been great across the season, but it's been much better recently. And I think the reason we like Newcastle defenders so much for the upcoming game week is they're playing against Leicester at home and Palace at home. So 2 home fixtures. Leicester are playing in the Europa Conference League 72 hours before they play against Newcastle. That could go 120 minutes. And then Palace are playing in the FA Cup 72 hours before they play against Newcastle. So they've got 2 home fixtures against probably 2 tired teams that are likely to rotate because they don't have much to play for, Leicester and Palace, in the Premier League. Now, they might go full strength and they might be fine, especially if they sort of get knocked out like within maybe 60 minutes. If they're 3 or 4 goals up or 3 or 4 goals down and they can rotate quite heavily and bring off their key players, it might not be that great for Newcastle. But I do think they are probably one of the better options for this upcoming game week. And I think you can definitely do worse than Fabian Schär. The issue is after game week 34, so from 35 onwards, I don't think you necessarily want a Newcastle defender. So you might have to think about making 2 transfers. So you need to think about how short term you want to look there. I actually think that Davis is probably one of the best options if you're looking for a cheap defender still. So it might feel a little bit sideways moving from Doherty to Davis, but you are making a bit of a downgrade in price there. And Tottenham are the 5th best defence in the league this season. And he's actually 2nd on the list for big chances per 90, 3rd on the list for non-penalty expected goals per 90. So despite being a left centre-back in that 5-back formation, Davis is actually a fantastic option, and he's very, very nailed in that team. I'd expect him to start all 7 remaining games, I should say, for Spurs. The only issue that you've got with Spurs is that, yes, they double in 36, but it's a pretty naff double. It's against, I think, Liverpool and Arsenal. It's a pretty terrible double. I don't think you would expect many clean sheets there. So, yes, they are good options, and the remaining fixtures are pretty good, but I wouldn't expect too much from them in the double game week, at least from a defensive perspective. Outside of that, you also have Emerson Royale. So, I don't think he's definitely nailed to start all the remaining games, but Tanganga's out for the remainder of the season, if I'm right in saying that. And I don't think they have a lot of options that can fill in at right back. So I do think Emerson Royale is likely to play the majority of the minutes for the remainder of the season. The issue is he has a very poor end product. But as you can see, he's actually 2nd on the list for touches in the box per 90. He's one of the top on the list for non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. So I actually think the upside's probably there with Emerson Royale, but if you want nailed on for minutes and you want someone that's actually putting up decent underlying data and for £0.1 million cheaper, I think that Davis is probably all right option in comparison to Emerson Royale. And then the other option at that sort of cheaper price is Mark Gehi. This could be Anderson, this could be Mitchell. Essentially what I wanted to draw your attention to is that I think Crystal Palace defenders are decent options. They're still 4th in the league this season for expected goals conceded per 90. So they are the 4th best defence in the league this season if you're looking at underlying data, which is remarkable. That puts them just behind the likes of, obviously, City, Liverpool, Chelsea. They are 4th in there. So they're ahead of Tottenham, they're ahead of Arsenal, they're ahead of Wolves, Brighton, all these defences that we say are pretty good. The issue is that none of their defenders have remarkable expected data going forward. So Anderson, Mitchell and Mark Gehi, they're probably the 3 that I would be going for. None of them are that outstanding, but I do still think they're all decent options. I've put Gehi on here because when I watch, he looks like he really attacks corners. That's a bit of an eye test, but also he's pretty good for bonus points as well. The thing with Palace is that they double in 37, not 36. If they beat Chelsea, that double could be moved to 35. So do bear that in mind. But if you're planning on free hitting in 37 at the moment, I probably wouldn't go for Palace. If you're planning on free hitting in 36, I actually probably would be looking at a Palace defender. After those 4 defenders, you then move on to sort of those middle-priced 4.9, 5 and 5.2. You've got Justin, Telles and Cash. For me, this again does depend on when you're playing your chips. But what I would say is in his limited minutes this season, it's been about sort of 500-600 for Justin. He's putting up very, very good defensive attacking data, I should say. So you can see touches in the box, he's actually 3rd on this list. Expected goal involvement per 90, he's 2nd on this list. And of course, he doubles in 33, 36 and 37. The issue with Justin is twofold. Number one, Leicester are absolutely naff at the back, right? They're pretty terrible defensively. As you can see here, they're actually the 3rd worst defence in the Premier League this season, even worse than Newcastle. So you're probably not hoping for too many clean sheets from Leicester. And the other issue is that they've got Pereira, Thomas, Castagna. They've got quite a few fullbacks that they can play in those positions. So there's a really high chance that Justin, I should say, doesn't play any of those doubles. He might only play 1 in each of them. But if he can nail down a place, or if Castagna can, or if Pereira or Thomas can, if we can try and predict generally who's going to start in the Premier League, then they might be good options. It massively depends on whether if they go through in the Europa Conference League, I would be tempted to avoid altogether. If they get knocked out, they actually still have a small chance of finishing 6th and 7th in the Premier League. I think they're about 11 points behind 6th, but they've got 3 games in hand. So I think there are worse options than a Leicester defender if you can try and nail down which Leicester defender is going to start. You've then got Telles, who's putting up actually pretty good data. You can see the best expected assist in the league out of these options, I should say, on the list. He's actually got one of the best non-penalty expected goal involvements per 90 on the list, and he's going to double in 33, and it's a decent enough double with Norwich being the first fixture. I've put 34 in question marks because Chelsea were knocked out of the Champions League. It could be that their double in 37 is actually moved to 36, which is basically the Manchester United versus Chelsea fixture. Sorry, moved from 37 to 34. That would give Manchester United a blank in 37. It would give Chelsea a single in 37, and it could mean a double for Telles in 34. So Telles could be getting a back-to-back double. Hopefully we'll know that before the 34 deadline. But either way, I do think he's a pretty good option with Shaw probably out for the remainder of the season, needing surgery on his leg. One of the best options on the list for me, and almost definitely going to be on my wildcard, is actually Matty Cash. The issue you've got with Matty Cash, of course, is that he blanks this week. So probably not an option this week. But what I would say is if you can keep Doherty in your team and wait until 34, I actually think Doherty to Cash in 34 is one of the best transfers you can make on this list. He's got 2.65 touches in the box per 90, which is top of the list. 0.14 expected goal involvement per 90, puts him as one of the best on the list. And of course, with cash, doubles in 36 and 37. Like I said, if Palace beat Chelsea in the FA Cup, it could be that he doubles in 35 and 36. But regardless, I do think that Matty Cash is a decent option. Not the best defensive data across this season, but they're at sort of mid-table, similar to Manchester United. So I really do think if you don't need to take out Doherty this week, rolling and then Doherty to Cash next week could be a fantastic option. And then you've got the three £5.4 million defenders. I think, in my opinion, the best of these is probably Evans. But again, it's very difficult because they've got Soyuncu, Amati, Fofana and Evans. They've got 4 really good centre-backs that could play in either the Europa Conference League or the Premier League. And Evans has obviously just come back from a long-term injury. I'm not sure how many minutes he's going to play. If you think Fofana is going to start all of the games, he's a good option. If you think Soyuncu is, if you think Amati is as well. Whoever you think is going to start a centre back, I think they're good options. But what I would say about Evans, he's played pretty limited minutes this year, but he's actually one of the best for the underlying data. So he's got the best big chances per 90, best expected goals per 90, and best expected goal involvement per 90 at 0.22, which is pushing towards the likes of Cancelo and Robertson. So very limited minutes, which does influence sort of the sample size is probably too small to draw too many trends. But he is a pretty good goal threat from corners, and I do expect Leicester to sort of push on if they get knocked out of the Europa Conference League. So again, assess what happens on Thursday. But for me, Evans could be a pretty decent option. I think Gabriel's probably not a very exciting option. I think we're pretty bored. We've owned Arsenal players for a while. Maybe we're looking elsewhere now. And I don't think their fixtures are that fantastic, but they do double in 33 and 36. They're the only team outside of Leicester that do so. So I think you can definitely do worse than going for a White, a Cedric, a Gabriel. Gabriel's obviously got the best underlying data from an attacking perspective. So I think if you can afford him, I'd probably go to him. And then the final one is actually Walker. Now, obviously, like Laporte, Rudiger, Cancelo, James, in my opinion, are better. But if you can't spread to those, I actually really like Walker because obviously Man City have the best defensive data in the Premier League, and they're going to double in either 36 or 37. It looks slightly more likely to be in 36. So I definitely think you could do worse. And to be honest, because Diaz is now starting to come back into training, I actually think that Diaz, Laporte and Stones are slight rotation risk. Walker looks very nailed on. Now, yes, you have Zinchenko that poses as a threat because Cancelo can come over to the right. But Pep Guardiola said in a recent press conference, Manchester City have to win all remaining 7 games that they have in the Premier League. They can't slip up at all. Walker has been absolutely excellent for Man City recently. I would not be surprised to see him start 7 out of the final, start all 7 of the final games. And I'm almost certain he'll start at least 6 of those. So if you're looking for a cheaper way into the Manchester City defence or a double up alongside Cancelo, I really like Walker. His attacking data is pretty poor because he tends to switch into almost like a back 3 role with Cancelo bombing forward. But you're not owning Kyle Walker for the attacking returns. You're owning him for potentially probably 4 or 5 clean sheets in the final 7 games. So those are, in my opinion, the best defensive options if you want a cheap player. It really does largely depend on your chip strategy. When are you playing your chips, especially your free hits? If you're free hitting in 37, again, I wouldn't go for a Palace defender. I'd be looking at someone that doubles in 36. If you're free hitting in 36, again, it largely depends on does that City game go into 36 or 37. If it goes into 37, Walker's a good option. Palace defenders are a good option, and Leicester defenders are a good option as well. I would say that Everton have some really good doubles as well. I just don't know who's nailed apart from Keane, and he's very prone to both own goals and red cards as well. But if you want to go for like a Mikalenko, if you think he's going to start a lot of games, Holgate, they could be good options as well. But these are my top players. Let me know down below, who are you replacing Doherty with? Do you have the funds to get up to the likes of James, Cancelo, Robertson, Trent, etc.? Or are you going to go for someone on this list? Always interested to hear your thoughts down below. So another question I had a lot was what to do with Weghorst. Is it worth selling him before a double game week, then Wolves, Watford, Villa? As you can see on your screen, the fixtures are actually very good for the remainder of the season. Apart from that Tottenham game and potentially Wolves from an attacking perspective, they're pretty good fixtures, and I'd be happy starting my Burnley players. The issue is that he's not returning and he looks really poor. So I want to caveat this by saying that I don't own Weghorst, so it's difficult to say exactly what I would do, but I'm going to try and give my opinion as to what I would actually do in this situation. I think I would keep him, but that's because I'm a bit of a sucker for a double game week. And similarly to what I said with Leicester and Palace, West Ham play shortly before the game against Burnley. So it might be that they rotate. It might be that they're tired, similar to what we saw with Brentford. And Burnley are fighting for their lives. There's a few issues with Weghorst. Number one, he keeps getting subbed off very early. Number two, he looks like he might be dropped altogether very soon. And number three, his underlying data is absolutely horrific. So if I'm doing my job as a content creator and suggesting what I think is probably the sensible decision to make, you should probably sell Weghorst. If we look at his underlying data, expected FPL points per 90 so far since coming to the Premier League, I think it was around game week 22, getting 3.36 expected FPL points per 90, which is pretty poor. It's just above the amount of appearance points you'd expect. His non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 is 0.25, which means if he plays 90 minutes every single game, he's getting an expected goal involvement every 4 games. But because he doesn't play 90 minutes, he plays about 50 to 60 at the moment. You're looking at an expected goal involvement of every sort of 7 to 8 games. That's really poor for a striker. You're expecting him to get an assist or a goal every 7 or 8 games. His big chances per 90 is 0.18. Again, that is per 90. So if he doesn't play 90 minutes, you're looking at a big chance again every maybe 9, 10 games here for Weghorst. And then touch in the box is 2.49 per 90. Again, if he's not playing 90 minutes, he's getting less than 2 touches in the box per 90. If you look at his shots per minute, he's getting a shot every 65 minutes in the Premier League, which means if you expect him to play about 100 to 130 minutes in double game week 33, assuming he comes off early or doesn't start a game, then you're probably looking at him getting about 2 shots over double game week 33. So again, if I'm doing my job as a content creator, pretty horrific statistics. It's probably worth selling him even for a single game week player such as an Ivan Toney doing slightly better. What I would say is that also Chris Wood is getting a shot about every 100 minutes for Newcastle. He's had 6 shots in the last 5 games, and one of those was a penalty. So if you're moving him to someone like a Chris Wood, don't expect miracles from Chris Wood either. And to be honest, Weghorst is on penalties as Chris Wood is. All Weghorst needs is 1 penalty in the next sort of 2 or 3 games. He's getting a 9-pointer there, and he's actually probably doing decently for 6.4 million. So yes, he's probably worth selling, but be careful if you're selling for the likes of Chris Wood. It looks like a bit of a sideways move, to be honest. So let me know down below what you're doing with Weghorst. Pretty poor statistics. I'm a bit of a sucker for a double game week, so I might be tempted to keep him. But do bear in mind that the underlying statistics suggest that you're probably not expecting too much from him over the coming game weeks. So this question is slightly more relevant for those of you that are on your free hit, but even if you're not on your free hit, still pay attention because we're going to talk about a bit about the defensive data of these teams as well, which is useful for the back end of the season. It's essentially which goalkeeper should we be going with for game week 33, and I guess potentially beyond as well, because most of these are your top options. So we've got Pope, Ramsdale, De Gea, Schmeichel, Forster, and Dubravka. I think the only changes that I would make if we were looking over the remainder of the season as opposed to just 33 is that Forster would come out, and I'd potentially put Pickford into here as an option, and then maybe De Gea would come out for the likes of Martinez. So what I've actually got is the first 3 columns are saves, expected goals prevented, which gives you a bit of an idea about how good of a keeper they've been over the last 6 matches, and then big chances saved. That is excluding penalties. And then we've got minutes per expected goals conceded, which gives you a bit more of an idea about the defensive data of the team rather than the goalkeeper. And then I've got projected points just for game week 33, which is taken from FPL Review. So here you're getting a bit of an idea about what sort of keeper they are, their expected goals conceded as a team, and then their projected points. This is after over the last 6 matches for each keeper rather than being over the last 6 game weeks, just to give you a bit more of an idea about how the team are performing and how the keeper is performing in more recent weeks. So the short of it is that recently, Schmeichel and Dubravka have probably been the best 2 keepers. So as you can see here, Schmeichel's made 22 saves in the last 6 matches. He's got an expected goals prevented of plus 4.1. Now, he did save a penalty, which obviously boosts up his expected goals prevented by about 0.8. So that is worth taking into account. But that isn't the only reason that he's on this list. He is also making some good saves outside of that. And he's actually saved 5 big chances. That's not, again, including the big chances saved from penalties. So I actually think that Schmeichel looks like a fantastic option for that reason. He's definitely playing very well for Leicester at the moment. Outside of that, I'd probably say Dubravka's been a very good option. Only made 15 saves, which isn't one of the best on this list here, but he's got an expected goals prevented of plus 1.1, and he's also saved 5 big chances as well. So I would actually say Schmeichel and Dubravka have been the best 2 keepers on the list here. Forster's actually been okay with respect to he's made 20 saves. He's also saved 5 big chances, but he's got an expected goals prevented of minus 3.6, which means he's actually letting quite a few chances that he potentially should have saved. Outside of that, De Gea, Ramsdale and Pope have actually all got negative expected goals prevented, which again means that they probably haven't been the best recently from a goalkeeping perspective at least. So again, Schmeichel and Dubravka are probably top of my list for now for that reason. But if we look at the defensive data of these teams, it paints a very different picture. So if we're trying to target the best defenses, it's actually, again, still probably Ramsdale here. They're getting an expected goals conceded every 80.8 minutes. So across a game, they're probably expected to concede around 1 goal, which is actually very decent. That sounds pretty poor, but that's actually pretty decent across the season. And then you can actually see Dubravka's on there for minutes per expected goals conceded at 72.9. So slightly lower than Ramsdale, but actually pretty decent over the last 6 games. So again, this is sort of driving home the fact that, yes, across the season, Newcastle's defence hasn't been fantastic, but I actually quite like it in recent weeks. And again, when you look at the opposition that they're facing with the other commitments they have in game week 33, Newcastle defence is a pretty good team to target, in my opinion. Again, they could capitulate, they could concede in both games, but I do quite like it for that reason. And then outside of that, De Gea is probably the 3rd best on this list. And then Schmeichel, Forster and Pope not looking good with respect to conceding lots of chances. It does mean that they'll probably get a lot of saves. And if they do keep a clean sheet, it's going to probably be a monster haul. But the defences haven't looked that great recently. And then if we look at projected points, Dubravka again coming out on top. And then you've got De Gea, followed by Ramsdale, Schmeichel, and then Pope. They're fairly closely together. It's only Forster that's down there on 4.0. So if I'm putting all of this together for game week 33, I think the best keeper that you can go for is probably Dubravka at 4.4 million, the cheapest on this list with Forster, but he's got one of the best expected goals prevented, one of the best big chances saved, one of the best projected points, and one of the best minutes per expected goal involvement conceded. Expected goals conceded, I should say. The only reason that I actually don't currently have Dubravka in my team is that Newcastle also have some very good cheap options in defence. Fabian Schär, Burn and Target. Even Emil Kraft could be a good option. They've got 3 or 4 really good cheap defenders that you could pick from Newcastle that are very, very nailed. The issue with someone like a Leicester defence is that they don't have those cheap options necessarily that are nailed. So Fana and Amati are good options, but they're not necessarily nailed. So what I actually currently have on my free hit, which we're going to discuss in my team selection video later in the week, is I've got Schmeichel in goal, and then I've got Burn and Target, or Target and Schär, or Schär and Burn, a combination of those 3 in defence. What that allows you is it allows you a route into the Leicester defence with a keeper that's clearly playing well and making lots of saves. But it also allows you to get double up on Newcastle defence for cheap as well. So if you're just purely looking at it as which keeper's the best, I think it's Dubravka. But when you take into account other things in context, I think Schmeichel, along with a Leicester double up, a Newcastle double up, probably if you have the funds of Fabian Schär and Target, is probably the ideal combination here. And then you can have one defender from probably either Arsenal or Manchester United with a Telles or maybe like a Cedric or Gabriel as well. So that is my personal opinion. Let me know down below if you're on your free hit, or even if you're not on your free hit, who are your keepers at the moment for the remainder of the season. I would probably say that Schmeichel's the one I'll be going for on my wildcard 34, just due to the fact, again, he looks pretty good at the moment. I do expect Leicester to continue to improve slightly. He's making a lot of saves, and they just have so many fixtures left as well. So one of the questions that I received over on Discord, by the way, if you haven't joined our Discord community, it's completely free. We chat FPL, we chat about all sorts of stuff over there. We've got almost 1,000 members on the Discord now as well. So if you haven't already joined the Discord, link to that is in the description. But one of the questions over on Discord was, is it worth taking a hit for Leicester assets? Now, I don't think the questions are Leicester assets worth it across the remainder of the season. They probably are. They've got so many fixtures and they're actually decent, especially from an attacking perspective. I guess the question remains, is it worth taking a hit for them this week when we're worried about potential rotation? So as you can see at the top of your screen, what I've got is I've got their fixtures with the FDR from the official FPL site, but I've also just put the Europa Conference League badge where their remaining fixtures would be, assuming they go through in the Europa Conference League. So it massively depends on what happens on Thursday. So of course, assess what happens on Thursday. Not only do they go through or not, but how many minutes do they play? If it goes 120 minutes and Maddison and Barnes both play 120, I probably wouldn't have either of them on my free hit, if I'm being honest. I just don't think it's necessarily worth it, and I probably wouldn't take a hit for them this week. But also, do they make it through to the next round? So of course, their second leg of the quarterfinal is just before game week 33, so about 72 hours before the Newcastle fixture. They've then got game week 34, so you would expect them to maybe play a decent 11 in 34. But after 34 and before 35, they've then got the first leg of the semi-final, again, assuming they make it through the quarterfinal. So it might be that they rotate slightly in 34 and also in 35, because it's either side of that Europa Conference League game. And then the other side of 35 before 36, they've got the second leg of the semi-final. So what that essentially means is that we might see rotation in 34, 35, and then the first fixture of 36. Game week 36, which is Everton at home. Now, that double is really nice anyway, and to be honest, I'll probably have a Leicester asset regardless. But if they rotate against Villa, Tottenham, and Everton, you might only get Maddison and Barnes, just as an example, against Everton away in 33. They might be rotated against Newcastle. You might get them in one of Villa and Tottenham, but maybe only for 60, 70 minutes. Then they might be rotated again against Everton, and you might only get them against Norwich. Now, there's still really good fixtures, especially if you consider that the first fixture of 37 is then against Watford as well. So I'm not trying to let this put you off too much, but you do need to realise that they've got still quite a few fixtures if they get through the Europa Conference League, dotted in between some really good fixtures in the Prem. And then the other annoying thing is that the final is actually 3 days after game week 38 because it's not the Champions League final. The Europa Conference League final is actually played quite soon. So game week 38 is on the 22nd of May. On the 25th of May, they have the Europa Conference League final. So I don't see any reason why Brendan Rodgers would go with a strong 11 against Southampton at home when it's very unlikely that they'll have anything to play for by that fixture. And they've got a very important fixture in the fight. Again, this is assuming they get through to the final. They might be knocked out in the quarterfinals. But if they do, that would worry me slightly. So it really, really does come down to what happens on Thursday. Do they get through and how many minutes do they play? Outside of that, I've just listed some of the key stats for some of their key players. It's worth noting that they are 18th in the league this season for expected goals conceded, so I wouldn't really be targeting their defence if possible. But they are 9th for expected goals per 90, which suggests that actually they're all right from an attacking perspective. The thing to note is that they are first in the league for attacking fixtures and they're first in the league for defensive fixtures. That's because of how many fixtures they have. And they still have to play Newcastle, Everton again, Norwich, Watford and Southampton dotted amongst some other fixtures in there. So they've got some really good fixtures to come. So if they do get knocked out, I'm definitely going to have at least 2 Leicester players on my wild card. If they don't get knocked out, I'll probably just stick with one or Maddison and Barnes. And it will probably be Maddison because as you can see, Maddison's got the best underlying statistics in the league this season. And for me, he's their most important player at the moment. I think Barnes, he looked really good maybe 7 or 8 game weeks ago, but he's dropped off recently. And I think the likes of Lookman, Perez, etc., they can fill in for Barnes in the Premier League, especially when they don't have that much to play for. So for me, Maddison would be top of my priority list. But for free hit 33, depending on how many minutes they play in the Europa Conference League, I could go for Barnes ahead of Maddison. And I could potentially be even convinced to go for the likes of Tielemans and KDH because I think they're slightly more nailed and less risk of rotation. Let me know down below, are you bringing in Leicester players this week, whether you're on your free hit or using your transfers? For me, it just all comes down to that Thursday night game. So I think all FPL managers' eyes are going to be on how many minutes they play and whether they make it through to the semi-final. So we did allude to Chris Wood's stats earlier on when we spoke about Weghorst, but I thought it was actually interesting to just quickly look at Chris Wood versus Saint-Maximin. I'll be honest, neither of these players have very good underlying statistics, and you're probably not going to want to hold either long term. I think for most people, this is probably a dilemma on free hit, but also I guess if you're wildcarding 34, it could be option, and also if you're wildcarding 35, that's probably even better because you get Leicester, Palace, and Norwich in the next 2 game weeks. So I do think the fixtures are there, and like I said, the fact that they're going to be playing a tired Leicester and a tired Palace makes them even better options. And I think I'm probably almost definitely going to be having one of these 2 on my free hit. I'll be honest, I'll caveat now by saying I started by having Saint-Maximin on every free hit draft. And more recently, I've now got Chris Wood on every free hit draft. The reason for this is I don't think either of them have particularly good underlying statistics. I think both could possibly get early substitutions, although I would expect both of them to play about 160, 170 minutes in the game week 33 double. The reason that I've gone for Chris Wood at the moment is, as you can see, his non-penalty expected goal involvement is actually 0.26, which is the same as Weghorst, so it's not very good at all. And Saint-Maximin's is 0.38. So from open play, Saint-Maximin's definitely the one with the greater goal threat and the greater assist threat as well. I just struggle with Saint-Maximin because he's so injury prone. And I do think if one of them is going to get an early substitution, it's likely to be him. And if you look at their shot maps, Saint-Maximin actually has decent non-penalty expected goal involvement, but a lot of that is made up through expected assists. And a lot of it is made up through a high quantity of low XG shots that sort of accumulate over time. So I think if you look at actually where they're getting their shots off from, Chris Wood gets a lot more central shots, a lot more shots in the box. And penalties are a thing. And we've seen that in the past when Tony got 3 penalties in 2 game weeks. Penalties do matter. And that would be one of the reasons I'd be tempted to keep Weghorst, as we spoke about earlier. But for me, there's not enough to separate them. That for me, expected minutes, I should say, for Wood are slightly higher. And the possibility of penalties just swings it in Chris Wood's favour. So at the moment, I've got Chris Wood on a lot of my free hit drafts. And of course, he's getting slightly more big chances, as you can see as well. 0.34 big chances per 90 to Saint-Maximin 0.15. I don't think there is a clear standout favourite. If you told me you're going for Saint-Maximin, I wouldn't mind at all. If you told me you were going for Chris Wood, again, I wouldn't mind. I could end up with either of them. And to be honest, if you want to go for Harry Kane or Ronaldo and then Chris Wood and Saint-Maximin alongside them, I think you could definitely do worse. But when you look at Newcastle's data and you look at the teams that they're playing, I actually think that the Newcastle defence, for the price that you can get them at, might be the slightly better options because I don't think there's that many good defensive options. Whereas in attack, just as an example, Che Adams, I think, probably has better expected data than both these. So Che Adams is sitting around a sort of 0.45 to 0.55, depending on which period you look at, is expected goal involvement per 90. So definitely, if you're looking at data, Che Adams is actually the one to go for. And he's got a decent fixture against Burnley in there. So you could look elsewhere. Whereas with the defence, I don't think there are actually that many good defensive options on the free hit for 33 at least. So let me know down below whether you're going for Chris Wood or Saint-Maximin. If I'm purely advising you based on the underlying statistics, I'm advising Saint-Max. But I think due to the fact that he's on penalties, due to the fact that he's getting slightly more big chances and slightly more central sort of high XG opportunities, I'm just about leaning towards Chris Wood at the moment. But I'm always interested to hear your thoughts down below. I thought it'd be good to just finish the video with points projections from Game Week 33 to Game Week 37 taken from FPL Review. So over the next 5 game weeks, this is for those of you that aren't using your free hit and are using transfers, and potentially for those of you that have got very limited chips left, who should you be targeting, right? Because this tells you every single week who's the top points projection, and then what I've ordered it by is total. Now, FPL Review is very accurate, to be honest, over a long period, but over 5 game weeks, they can be quite incorrect because it's impossible to predict the future. But they're projecting based on underlying data across the season, based on difficulty of the opponent. And I think sometimes this can be a pretty useful metric to be using to try and prioritize transfers. So as you can see, quite clearly at the top of the list is on 39.2 is Mohamed Salah. I'll be honest, I'm still deciding whether to have him on my free hit. I'm almost certain that he's going to be on my wildcard 34. Yes, there are other good options. De Bruyne, Kane, Son. You could potentially even downgrade Salah to Jota to upgrade to the likes of Havertz and Foden in your midfield. I just don't think it's worth it for me. I think he's a very good captaincy shout every single game week, as you can see by his projected points. And I don't want to go without Salah, in my personal opinion. The fact that he's on penalties is always an added bonus, but his underlying data continues to be very good. Outside of that, you've got a few options that are sitting around sort of the 33 to 30 points. Maddison is second on this list. So again, depending on what happens on Thursday, I think Maddison should be a priority transfer for you. De Bruyne is actually the second premium on this list. So it could be that you just drop Spurs assets altogether and say, I don't expect them to continue to put up the data they're going because they don't have as many fixtures. And actually they're overperforming their expected goal involvement, Son and Kane, every single week. So you could potentially go for Salah and De Bruyne as your 2 premiums. Outside of that, Trent, James, and then Kane and Son at the 4 below that. So a lot of these premium assets, you obviously can't own all of these. Mount's actually fairly high up on this list, and either Mount or Havertz will probably be in my wild card because they're obviously knocked out the Champions League now, which means that they can prioritise the Premier League slightly more alongside the FA Cup. So I might be going with a Mount or Havertz in midfield. Then you can see Mane's on there. I probably won't go with Mane. I just think that Salah's the better option, and I probably like to diversify slightly. Then Saka's actually on here. Now, Saka's not in my free hit, and I'm actually thinking about not having Saka on my wild card, but this does make me question whether he should potentially be on my free hit and my wild card. Schmeichel's actually the first keeper on this list, so just draws into the fact that they've got so many fixtures left that it's probably worth going for Schmeichel. Actually projected to get slightly more points than Robertson over the remainder of the games. Robertson is then there. Lacazette's on there because, again, doubling 33, doubling 36. He's on penalties, decent underlying data. And then you've got 3 really tasty mid-price mids that I would like 2 of on my wild card, which is Mahrez, Havertz, and Foden. So head over to FPL Review. You can actually get this stuff for free. This is the free model that I use. You can get a paid for version, but they actually do some pretty good points projections. I like to look at this from time to time. We will discuss this in more detail next week when I do my complete Game Week 34 wildcard guide. So if you're looking forward to a complete Game Week 34 wildcard guide, do subscribe so you get that content next week. But for me, if I were prioritising transfers for you this week, assuming depending what happens with the Europa Conference League, I'd be looking at Maddison. I'd be looking at potentially like a Mount or a Havertz. I think are good options. I do think that they'll probably beat Arsenal. And then outside of that, maybe just focus on those that double in 33 and then look to start to shift your team around from Game Week 34 onwards. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 33 preview video done and dusted. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do drop a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to go on above and beyond to support the channel, you can join the Patreon link down below, and you can become a member of the YouTube channel as well, link down below. Both of those will allow you to get sort of prioritized team feedback directly from me. Also join our private Discord channel as well and join our private mini league too. So there are lots of perks associated with it, but you also help to support the channel as well. Until next time, guys, which will be my team selection video, my free hit draft on Friday morning. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.